we hit the runway, and then we had to eject, and my chute partially opened. My friend's chute malfunctioned and didn't fully open. He hit a tree. He got killed. Um, I woke up in the hospital with a broken back, and just like that, everything I dreamed of doing was kind of over.
Hello, welcome to the Perception Podcast. I am your host, Thomas Casey Zellers, and today we are hopefully going to change your perception on things that you thought you already knew. And joining me in the studio today is Sil. How you doing today?
Good, man.
Yeah, it's good to have you in the studio today, and we're going to be talking a little bit about some PTSD and your military background that you have as well, but how you've grown from it, and now you're teaching guys. Is that right?
Sure.
Yeah. So I guess to start things off, just go ahead and introduce yourself and take
I'm
it away.
Silouan Green. Hey there, fans of him. I basically right now, for about 17 years, I've spoken, taught on PTSD, suicide prevention, leadership, peer support all over the United States. During the war, I worked with the military, primarily at Fort Campbell, Fort Bragg, and Camp Lejeune. It's kind of the war wound down. I started doing a lot with first responders and law enforcement. So I've worked with the Pentagon, I've worked with Homeland Security, I've worked with NYPD, California Highway Patrol, FBI, Departments of Two, Illinois State Police, Colorado State Police, everything in between.
So you've kind of done a little bit of everything.
Yeah, in that field. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
pretty much talked to, when it comes to PTSD and whatnot, I've pretty much, the people that have suffered from it the most on the front lines are the ones that I've kind of helped. And it was just kind of all word of mouth, and it was all just kind of beginning from my own recovery of overcoming having PTSD and being suicidal myself.
Gotcha. So I guess then, how did you first just get in the military? Was there something that prompted you? Because I know my generation, the thing that prompted them was 9/11, to go, and they're saying, enough is enough. I'm going to go fight. That's a bunch of BS. Was there something that prompted you, or was it just something that kind of you were just like, well, no, maybe this is just something that interests me?
Oh, I don't know. I was probably like a lot of young men of my generation. I had a lot of, you had fathers and uncles that were in Vietnam, and grandfathers and great grandfathers that were in World War II. And, then when I was little, there was Top Gun, and then, there was the first Gulf War, which was over like that quick. And so honestly, it was really just probably the romantic nature of, it was probably just the romantic nature of being in the military, and you have a choice. And, usually the way I tell it is, I grew up in Northern Indiana. I got a scholarship to go to Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. At Vandy, my freshman year, freshman dorm, walking along, and there's a recruiting poster of a Marine.
I want
standing,
you.
standing next to an F-18. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. Be a Marine.
Yeah.
Fly that. That's cool. And so, I went down to the recruiter. I was naive. Again, I had lots of relatives and stuff, so I had some pretty cool stories. And, I had a great grandfather who was in World War I. And so I went down to the recruiter, and he was like, yep, come here, son. You can do this. And, in the Marine Corps, to be a pilot, you got to be an officer. And it just all kind of happens. And so the way that happens is, to be an officer in the Marines, most of them come from college kids that go to this thing called OCS. In the Army and the Air Force, most of their officers come from the academies, or ROTC, or Navy ROTC, okay. Army ROTC, Air Force ROTC.
Okay.
Most of the officers in the Marine Corps come from this thing called OCS, and it's basically college kids in the summer. And I still think nothing's really changed in years. Is you either go to 2 6-week courses in 2 different summers, or 1 10-week course. It's just a bunch of college kids who want to be officers. You're not technically in the Marines yet. It's kind of a weird thing.
Is it kind of like just like some weird limbo type of thing?
Well, I don't know. You kind of, because you let's say you're enlisted and you go to boot camp. I mean, you get sworn in before you go to boot camp. Technically, you're in the Marine Corps, you go to boot camp. But you
Okay.
got to finish it. Where when you go to OCS, you're just, if they want to, you could quit and then get rid of you the next day. And
Okay.
it's basically a washout. So like when I went through it, we started with like 200 some, maybe like 220 something.
Uh-huh.
At the times, college guys that wanted to be officers. And,
Okay.
and by the and I did it over 2 summers. And by the time we were finished, I think we had 50 that were left. So then you go through that, and then the Marine Corps, no matter what you're going to end up doing, you go to what's called TBS in Quantico. It's like 6 months long, and it's basically where every Marine officer learns to be a basic kind of Marine infantry-focused officer. And then when you're done,
so like kind of ground level type of stuff.
Yeah, very ground level, very basic. But again,
Okay.
a little bit different than the other branches, because
Okay.
in the other branches, you tend to immediately start going into your track of what your career is going to be. Where with the Marine Corps, you get, and this is the same for enlisted. Like when you're an enlisted, say the Army, you might go in to boot camp knowing what you're going to do when you get out. With the Marine Corps, you just go in. And so as an officer, you go to Quantico, you're there for 6 months, and you kind of know what you're going to do. And, and I was there on what's called an air contract, where if you meet all these requirements, that you got to be able to go to flight school. But still, you might not be able to do it. So anyway, you go through there for 6 months, and I'll probably share this because this gets into the mindset of like PTSD and how it develops. Is basically one of the ways to look at PTSD is you have unresolved, unprocessed emotions. Okay. One way to think of it is trauma gets stuck. There's a way our brain takes bad things, and, it goes from that sort of emotive, reactive part of our brain. And then over time, almost just naturally, we process it, and it kind of goes to that logical part of our brain. And we're kind of able to go, okay, that happened to me. This is the result. This is how I moved on. That's not in my present now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the creation of a memory from like a scientific standpoint really is just you take an event, you attach it to an emotion, and then it's there forever at that point, right?
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Okay.
But so it kind of gets stuck, and one of the reasons, and this would go with the military and first responders, should go with anybody, but I think one of the reasons that it becomes the thing you kind of talk about when it comes to mental trauma in those areas is, I think one of the reasons that it can get stuck is the training, because even that initial training you go through, what they're training you to do is to compartmentalize so you can sort of ignore those emotions, because war means like your friends are going to die, and war means you're going to kill kids, and war means innocent people are going to get slaughtered around you, and war means the enemy might be a 19-year-old just like you, with parents just like you. And if you think about it, that's hard to do. Back in the Civil War, when the Civil War was over, and this is kind of where, again, I'm just going back to the beginning, since your emphasis kind of like PTSD. What's interesting is Civil War, there was really no boot camp. Like basically you joined a unit, they gave you a kit, they go there, you're going there to the, 216th Indiana, you showed up, maybe you got a little bit of drill, you got a little bit of instruction, and the next thing you know, you were in battle. When the Civil War was over, there were these, and they were really more like, archaeologists, historians, and they were digging up battlefields, looking for artifacts. And they went to this one, and they found all these rifles that had, the barrels were filled with ball rounds.
Oh, wow.
Okay. It had been fired.
Yeah.
And it was obvious once they examined these, hey, what was going on? If somebody was acting like they were shooting, so it looked like, if I'm like your commander and I look at you, it looks like but they weren't. And at first they were like, okay, is this like cousins fighting? Is this particular battle like my cousin? And so they started. They dug up more battlefields, and they interviewed more soldiers. And what they discovered is that most of them never fired. I think the estimate was like 7%. So like 7% of Civil War soldiers could like effectively aim, breathe, squeeze, kill somebody. And most people, they already knew most men died in the Civil War from like artillery, disease, things like that. So they started asking them questions. They wanted to know, well, why was it so hard to kill? And basically what it came down to is one, it's scary. So it's really hard when you're scared. When you're scared, you know, you want to run, you want to freeze. You talk about like fight, flight, or freeze. Very few people fight. If you don't have training, for the most part, you're going to freeze or you're going to run away. And so a lot of them would just be afraid. Okay. And then it's hard to kill somebody. Like if you're not trained to kill another human being, it is hard, you know, to go boom, even if you're being shot at.
Yeah.
And so that's when we decided, okay, we need to begin to train people to be able to compartmentalize that when we tell them to pull the trigger, they pull the trigger. So that kind of began between the Civil War and World War I.
So is there like I guess like a method then that they're teaching soldiers to detach from the fact that that's a human?
Yes, 100%. So
Really?
what happened was, the way we got to where we are today.
Yeah.
So from Civil War to World War I, basically it was a formalized boot camp. It was more formalized training. Like we are going to take you through this transition of being a civilian to being a professional soldier, and we are going to do all these steps. And by doing that, you know, you're going to aim when we tell you to aim, and you're going to fire when we tell you to fire. You're going to get better at it. And so that, you know, again, the stats are tough until you get to modern times. But estimates are anywhere. We went from the Civil War from about 7% to World War I, maybe about 20%. But still, think about it.
Wow.
You got 100 soldiers, and they're on a rifle, and they got to do this. About 20% of them could like dial it in and do it. The rest, because of fear, because of not wanting to kill, a whole bunch of reasons.
Well, I'm sure World War I was even more terrifying because of the machine gun. Like I don't remember the guy's actual name, but there was a German soldier that they asked, like whenever you're at a machine gun, like what was it like? And all he said was, I didn't have to really aim. If I saw somebody, I could just fire in that direction, knowing I probably hit them.
Trench warfare, gas, air warfare for the first time ever.
Yeah.
Tank warfare for the first time ever. Yeah. Crazy stuff.
It had to be terrifying.
Totally. So it's like, but still it's 20%, you know.
Yeah.
Civil War was just as terrifying because imagine, you know, the main way you died is you're going at the enemy line, and they have cannon filled with like nails and bolts. You know, you think of a cannon and like a cannonball. Yeah. Really what it was with the infantry was gunpowder and anything metallic you could fit in there.
Yeah.
And you would try to get to them before they shot it off and tore all of you apart.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
So then from World War I to World War II, we learned from World War II. We get better at teaching people to kill, the whole boot camp thing, and learning from those lessons. It goes from about 20% in World War I to they estimate 50 to 70% or in World War II. Then we learn our lessons from World War II, and this kind of gets to the question you just asked.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think psychologically in that, you know, other than the very beginning where we're like, we got to do this in a formalized way. Once they started doing that, the big jump was from World War II to Vietnam, because we went from qualifying on a circular target to a silhouette target. Okay. So, and then plus now in Vietnam, you know, you're qualifying on like 5.56 and it's further away. And, you know, a couple hundred yards away, that silhouette looks almost like it does for real.
Yeah, because Vietnam was also similar to World War I in the sense that there was now new weaponry that we have and new things that it's just like we need to actually go into combat with this stuff, right? Or
yeah, it was still, Vietnam was still pretty close to World War I. I would say that World War II, that Vietnam was more modern versions of what we had in World War II, you know, because World War II had bombers and jets near the end of the war, the Germans.
Right.
But you know, everything just got better. The gun, you know, the planes got better, the artillery got better, you know, the weapons, you know, everything got better. But I think the difference in Vietnam, and this also get another PTSD topic. The biggest difference between, I don't think, was the weaponry, is how it was fought. Where in World War II, there was a clear delineation between I'm an American with a star on my tank, and you're a German with a swastika, or you know. And even though there were obviously civilian casualties, it was much more, you know, their army, our army were fighting each other. Where you got to Vietnam, you're fighting everybody.
Right.
And that's kind of been warfare ever since. I think that's one reason, even since Vietnam, PTSD has been more of a topic, because there's something you can kind of rationalize in your mind when you're just killing German soldiers in German uniforms, or Japanese soldiers in
When
Japanese
it's more
uniforms.
guerrilla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you're fighting a grandpa who looks like a grandpa and he doesn't have a uniform and he just happens to have a gun, or, I'm sure you saw the Chris Kyle movie, where
Love them. I actually make it a point to watch that every Memorial Day.
Yeah, it's a great movie. But there's that scene he's got to shoot that kid.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a kid. And that was normal,
Yeah.
and there's no silhouette target for a 12-year-old with a gun.
Mm.
So they go to the silhouette target into Vietnam, and then you get to Vietnam and they estimate it gets up to close to 90%. And then you go today, we learn from Vietnam, our psychology gets better, our training gets better. There's been some people who write a lot on the psychology of warfare that thinks today it's even higher because of video games. You get desensitized, playing Call of Duty, as silly as that may sound. But they estimate now it's about 97%.
Wow.
So real quick, and then I'll go back to kind of how I got to where I'm at. But if you really want to know why, if you really want to just cut through all the smoke about, PTSD and the military and law enforcement, it is this. Average human being, let's just go. I mean, it probably isn't this, but let's just go back to it.
Sure.
Average kid on their own, 7 to 10% of the time could be a killer. So you got no training. Here's a gun, go kill somebody. 10% of people could do it effectively. Okay. We take that raw material and we give them all these like mental and physical and spiritual and social skills to be a killer, to the point they'll basically kill whoever you tell them to 97% of the time. And then we give them no skills to unpack that. None. Okay. Even now, mental health is very reactionary. People talk about wellness and they talk about it, and we're getting better at it. But still, in general, you don't go see someone who you're broke. Even though anyone could rationalize, you should see a marriage counselor when you get married before you have problems, so you learn tools to deal with the problems.
Right, but I think premarital counseling has become like super popular now.
Yeah, but I don't mean I mean when you get married.
Oh yeah.
I mean, plenty of people when I got married did premarital counseling.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say it's worthless, but what helps is when you're married. And it's a year later, that's when you need to go to counseling, not you wait 10 years. And I think that's what happens to people. And so what happens, you're not going to see the counselor until you're getting divorced, and you should have saw him 5 years earlier. Well, that's how we deal with all the mental health stuff. And even though the military and first responders are doing a lot better at offering preventive measures, there's still not the culture to do it. And so you kind of wait till you're broken.
Yeah.
And that's really the problem. And I think just like, ultimately there's a boot camp for, becoming a Marine, becoming a soldier. To me, there needs to be a boot camp for coming home.
Yeah.
Like there needs to be, you can't show up at a recruiter and go, I've watched every war movie in existence, and, I know the life biography of Chesty Puller, and I've shot 10,000 rounds. That boot camp and stuff, I don't need that. I know what it means to be a Marine. You don't have a clue what it means to be a Marine. Same token, I think when you get to the end of your career, no matter what you did, you should have to go through the same thing, like a complete mandatory guided unpacking of your military career. You went in when you were a kid. Now you're an adult. Your life's changed. What are you going to do next?
And it's kind of shocking to me that there already isn't like a mandatory program for that in any branch of the military.
Well, it's like a lot of things in life. There's a check in the box. There's a thing they call TAPS. It's been around forever. And really it's usually a 2-week course on, with vital information. Like if you go to a job interview, wear a suit. How do you turn your military resume into a civilian resume? And, there might be a little bit on, okay, when you get out, you can go to this thing called the VA. And if you have these signs of PTSD, go to them. And then, individual bases, individual units may have something. But in general, it doesn't exist. There is no mandatory unpacking at all. Now, I could recognize it and I could asked to go see a counselor, and depending on what that counselor's like, it might be helpful, it might not.
Yeah.
But that's not the same thing. That's not the same thing being with a group of people and together, because there's a power to that. You know, I think when you try to unpack individually, it doesn't have the same effectiveness as when you unpack as a group. So anyway,
yeah,
take all that back. So, you know, the Marine Corps, which is really good at teaching people, as I put it, to suck it up, is horrible at teaching it to unpack.
Marines eat crayons.
Yeah, yeah. You know, most years, you know, the Marine Corps has the worst suicide rate. But we're good at teaching you to suck it up. And so you go there, and for officers, you know, OCS is where you're learning to do that. And then you get out, and then, you know, you go specialize in what your job's going to be. So with me, I go to flight school, and
about 1 year was this? Did like the Gulf War just end? Or?
Yeah, it was like mid-90s.
Okay.
Yeah. Gotcha. So then, you know, you go to flight school, and, you know, depending on how you graduate, you know, some guys get helicopters, and some guys get transport planes, and some guys get jets. And so I got jets. I finished first in my flight school class, and I don't really want to go into it. Let's just say, in a training mission in Oceania, we got this thing called uncontrollable trim tab, where, you know, everything's electronic. So as we're taking it off and you're starting to trim things up, it spun out of control, and we hit the runway, and then, you know, we had to eject, and my chute partially open, my friend's chute malfunctioned and didn't fully open. He hit a tree, he got killed. I woke up in the hospital with a broken back, and, you know, just like that, everything I dreamed of doing was kind of over. And I think the hardest part of that, and again, this goes, I think, into the PTSD thing for military people, is up until that point, you think you're invincible. Like, you're like, I'm the baddest dude in the room.
Do you think that has something to do with the training? Whenever you're sitting in boot camp and they're telling you, like, oh, suck it up and whatnot? Or?
100%. I mean, yeah, because you got to be able to kill people. I mean, the only person that's going to go into combat thinking, I'm going to survive and you're going to die, is somebody with that mindset. That's the only way. And so, you know, like even at OCS, I mean, out of like 200 some Marines, I won the physical fitness combat award. I mean, I was in insane shape. And so, you know, you're thinking, I'm the baddest dude in the room. And then, you know, I saw it during the war, you know, until that moment, you think you're invincible, but, you know, you saw kids getting ready to go on their first deployment, and, they're all like, let's go, let's get some. I mean, they're going to play a Call of Duty game. And then they get over there and they see war, and then it's like, oh, that's.
And then they immediately learn it's not like Call of Duty.
Yeah, it's not like Call of Duty. And then, you know, you're going on your second or third deployment, their faces are like, yep, going overseas, gonna deploy. You know, you become very businesslike. And what happens, and this is why, you know, SEALs and Green Berets, and, you know, the more deployments they do, the PTSD rates are crazy. Because what you begin to do is you get really focused and really hyper compartmentalized, and you really take the emotion out of it. And that's why you meet them and they're very like flat effect and like, yep, that's my job, man. That's what I did. Because they have buried that fear. It's there, man, but it's buried, you know? And so to them, they just reach a point, you know, going over there, it's like me and you doing a podcast. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. So going back to you in the hospital, then what was kind of going through your mind?
Well, you know, the first thing going through your mind is, well, with me, it was, you know, when they told me my friend's dead, I'm like, okay, you know, you rationalize it and you go, okay, people die, deal with it, suck it up. And then the second thing is, well, I'm going to be fine then. I'm alive. I'm going to be good. And then that's really, I think, the thing that stayed with me, because I just never got better. Because I was in and out of a hospital for about 2 years. You know, I had, you know, all these physical injuries, and, you know, eventually they just decided, hey, we're going to what's called, they med board you. So before they, you know, disability discharge you or retire you out of the military for a physical reason, they got to go through a med board. And because of my back and because of some other stuff, you know, eventually I'm in San Antonio, Texas at Wilford Hall Medical Center. And, because they specialized in flight injuries at the time. That's why it was an Air Force base.
Mhm.
And eventually they just decided, hey, we're not going to get this guy fit for duty, going to go through a med board. And then really I just got left alone. I mean, the Marine Corps at that point could care less about me. My command didn't care about me. They didn't check in on me. I stayed at that hospital. And that's really where I went crazy because, you know, that's when I was beginning to lose my identity as like Marine, because I knew like I'm not going to fly again. I'm not going to be a Marine anymore, you know, and I was there alone and didn't want to tell anybody about it, had to suck it up. And, you know, I kind of went on this cycle where, you know, I'm depressed, and, you know, the more depressed I get, the more I isolate myself, and the more I isolate myself, I don't PT and I don't work out. As I get out of shape, I get in more pain. And then at one point I had a flight surgeon I knew.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm going through that, he gave me open prescriptions for Percocet, Vicodin, and Zoloft. He's like, you know, take the Percocet and Vicodin as needed, and, you know, pop the Zoloft every day. And that made me feel like kind of like a loser, because like, who needs those drugs? A loser must need those drugs. And then the hospital was giving me drugs that were working on me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was on pills all the time. And then, you know, that'd make me more depressed. And I was just, you know, I was just spinning out of control. And I think more than anything, you know, when it comes, you know, something like PTSD develops. Like before you have it, you don't have it. Suicide develops. Before you're suicidal, you're not suicidal.
So it's just really kind of that lurking enemy in the background that you don't see that comes up.
Well, you see it. You definitely see it. It's just your ability to deal with it breaks down. What happens is it wears you out. You know, because PTSD in a sense is a trauma response that's burned into your nervous system. And so you get really hypervigilant, and things can set you off, and you know it and you can't control it. And then you do things to try to control it, and it impacts your life in ways that limits your ability to control it. So you're like, I don't sleep and I self-medicate, which limits my ability to control it. And then it just gets worse, you know? And then what happens is you just get to a point you're just wore out, you know, and it might be the person that becomes suicidal and just decides, you know, F it. It might be the person with PTSD that gets to the point they can't leave the room. They can't function in the world. And really it's just because your ability to withstand it has been worn down. And that typically, you know, that I found most people with PTSD, most people who are suicidal, most of the time are not what you would expect. They're not like real emotional and, oh, I'm freaked out or I'm depressed. You're just like done, man. You're just like, I'm done.
It's the guy who's checked out.
Yeah, you're just totally checked out. You're just done. And so that was the path that I was going down. And so then all the things you really hear about when it comes to PTSD, that's really when I started to become aware of those symptoms in me, because now that I knew, hey, they're going to med board me, which means, you know, I'm not going to be a Marine soon, and I'm taking all these meds, and I just, you know, the hallucinations and the hypervigilance and all that stuff started to happen. And, you know, in a lot of ways, I took this mindset of just like, I'm just waiting to die. That's what I'm doing. I'm waiting to die.
Was there like the societal stigma as well of like, you're a man, you can't show emotions or you can't cry, and then added on to the Marine of like, suck it up? Do you think a lot of that was playing into you as to why?
A little bit. I think it was more the Marine thing and being tough.
Okay.
I mean,
not really more of a societal norm.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because honestly, what people don't realize, those vets could give a crap what society thinks about them.
Yeah.
Like by the time you're in, it's such an us versus them. I don't care what you think about me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care. You know what I mean? That's kind of where you're at. But internally, like that standard that you're supposed to be, like, here's what a Marine's supposed to be. Here's what a SEAL's supposed to be. Here's what a Ranger's supposed to be. That's mojo. Like, that's powerful. You know what I mean? Like, that's burned into.
Is that why they didn't show so much, like, I don't want to say care, I guess maybe interest is the word that I'm looking for. So much interest into your emotional state after the fact, or?
No, I think with the military, the prime reason they don't, it's cold, it's calculated. It's very cynical sounding, but it's true. All they care about is readiness. When you're in the military, you know, if you think about it, you know, the high level officers move every 3 years. Lower level, you might stay at the same base, come up in your unit, you know, for career. But the higher level people that are determined on all this move a lot. And they're once you get to that point, I mean, once you get like above, you can, someone who stays in for 20, like as an officer, you could retire as a major if you weren't that motivated, but you were good enough to stick around. But once you get to like lieutenant colonel and colonel, and especially you get to lieutenant colonel and colonel, and you want to be a general, okay, in any of the branches, in the Navy, it'd be an admiral. Your career is based on criteria that the mental health and wellness of your soldiers or sailors or Marines or airmen don't matter. It's readiness. Are you ready to deploy? And see, the problem with mental health, you're in this gray area. You can't deploy if it's bad enough, but you're on my books.
So it's not so much as that they don't care about you and your mental state. They're just sort of like an employer, like trying to run a business. They're like, we need the able-bodied guys.
Yes, and we don't need you on our books if you're not.
Gotcha.
Just like, think of a business, if you were a construction business and 10% of your payroll was on workman's comp and not working. And it stays that way. And then the other guys, 1% is. Well, who do the shareholders want? They want the person with 1%.
1%, yeah.
It's the same thing. What does the military want? They want combat-ready units. If you are in the hospital because you're getting treated for PTSD, you're not combat-ready. And again, it can make you cynical. Maybe I'm cynical. Maybe I'm just realistic. They say the right things, but the motivations are completely different. And ultimately, you're going to follow your motivations. And the motivation in the military isn't, how do we get these men and women at the end of their careers healthy? The motivation is, how are we ready to complete the mission? And I get it. I mean,
how do we win the war?
Not to go off on a tangent, but that's why I think personally the military does too much and it's too big. It shouldn't be go join the military for a career. It should be join the military to go protect our country and kill people. And you know what you're getting yourself in for.
Yeah.
And I think you'd have better mental health outcomes because you'd be forced to deal with them. But now it's like a business. It really is. It's like a business. And then I think you make decisions over dollars and cents and numbers on a paper, not a human being. And that was me. Someone made the determination. It wasn't worth what it would take to try to completely get this guy fit for duty, because if we spend the money and he isn't fit for duty, we've wasted that money.
Spend the money on.
We're better off to let the VA. We don't want our money to fix them. We want the VA's money to fix them, if they can even fix them. It's that simple. I mean, it's like an equation, and that's kind of when I went crazy, and then that's really, I think, where my story of what I do today started, because all of a sudden, even though I'm a young man at the time, I'm still looking at life in the world like, okay, what am I going to go do now? I felt like, my life was over.
Were you a spiritual person before then, like at all?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I mean, my dad was a pastor. My brother's a pastor. Okay. I grew up in the church. I never didn't believe in God. I just had moments I was mad at God. I was, I find a lot of times.
So you knew God here. You probably just didn't really know him here.
Yeah, I kind of knew him in the heart too.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew him. You can know God and be mad at him. And I think that, I looked at the world and I'm like, yeah, you're there, but I don't care. You're not any better. The devil, God, yeah. You won. I mean, it was almost like that. Like, it's just like you do some really bad things, like
just content, complacent.
Yeah, and just mad. Like, I don't like the world you created. And what I find is, not obviously not all, but a lot of times people that say they don't believe in God really just don't like God. That what they will tell you is, if God is this way, I don't believe in him. Well, not liking somebody is not a reason to think they don't exist.
Right.
It's just I don't like you.
Yeah.
And so I think I had enough self-awareness of what I was mad about. It's like, again, I didn't not believe in God. I'm saying, I don't like you. I don't like, I don't like this world you've created. I don't like your bargain, whatever. And so anyway, so I wasn't, and so, which kind of, again, that's a good question, because it kind of leads to what's next. So, basically my kind of moment of truth is I was in bad state. And I'm getting near the time when my med board's going to go through, and I'll be, be discharged. And I'm in this coffee shop outside. But by this point, I'd been at Wilford Hall for about a year and a half, 2 years, maybe a year and a half. I'm staying in officers' quarters. I'm going to outpatient therapy for things. I couldn't sleep. Had bad insomnia, and I'm in this coffee shop at like 2 in the morning. And it's when you could still smoke in a coffee shop in Texas. And I wish you could sometimes. And so I'm in this.
That's Texas for you.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. So I'm in this coffee shop in Texas, smoking, and I had and one of my triggers for PTSD for years was the weather, because in Oceana when the crash happened, it was hot, it was humid, it was like a summer storm,
Mm-hmm.
and so if you get the right heat, right humidity, I would just start feeling anxious and nervous for many years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm in there and I started feeling that, and it was like this storm was breaking out in the coffee shop. And I didn't know if it was my PTSD or the drugs I was on, or I hadn't slept in a week. But
What's in the cigarette, right?
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, the psychiatrist I was seeing, who ended up helping me a bunch by just talking to me as a human being, one of the things we had talked about is when I was a really young boy, I was very creative.
Mm-hmm.
And really just that pursuit of culturally, this is where I think the culture would come in, just, being an athlete and being tough. I just didn't follow that creative thing as much. And we had talked about it. And at one point, I had said to her, pretty soon I'm not going to can't do this anymore. What am I going to do next? And she kind of challenged me and was like, what would that little boy do? And I didn't know what he would do, but he was kind of always in the back of my head.
Were you scared at all?
Nah, not really. I was mad. I wasn't scared. I was just mad. I think I was mad and angry and depressed, and I felt shame. I felt guilt. Yeah, I wouldn't say I was scared.
Was your guilt like, I guess, like what they attribute to survivor's guilt?
Yeah, I had some. I definitely had survivor's guilt. Yeah, I had a bunch of guilt. So I'm sitting there in this coffee shop, and it was like the storm broke out, and then I thought back to her, and I'm like, well, normally I would go home and, put a gun to my head, or I would go out, drinking or something. But man, what'd that little boy do? And I said, that little boy would probably write something. And so I asked this waitress for something to write with. I think she gave me a pencil, and I grabbed the napkin and see if I can remember it. It just literally came out of me, like, took a storm to crack a mortar, the stone, the aged clay, to build the walls. Wait a minute. Took a storm to crack the mortar, the stone, the aged clay. The walls I built. I'm trying to remember this poem. I can't remember it now. We'll have to do this later. This is my book. But anyway, I wrote this poem about going through this and coming out of it with nothing. Okay. And the end of this poem is that basically, now that my life has been washed away, the very last line is, and now I'll swim. And basically it was realizing, man, if I'm sitting here in a dark room with a gun to my head, what do I got to lose to live? I got nothing. It also made me realize, I might have survivor's guilt, but how am I honoring him in the way I'm living? I'm not. You honor somebody by how you live your life. And so I'm like, I gotta start living again. And, one thing I'd always wanted to do was like play the guitar. So I bought a guitar, started playing it. Another thing I'd always wanted to do, I always wanted a motorcycle. Never had one. Sold my car, bought motorcycle. And so then the day, my med board went through and I left the Marine Corps. I wasn't all better. I still didn't really know where I was going. I was still kind of angry and pissed. I still had bad days, but I felt like I was moving forward. I felt like I felt like I was on my own, learning to unpack, what I had been.
Would you say it's kind of like that quote, whenever you have nothing to lose, you have everything to gain?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I tell people that. I tell people versions of that all the time. 100%.
Yeah.
And so, I wasn't all right, so I basically.
You weren't good, but you were better.
Yeah. And then, when I, go, it's my last day in the Marine Corps, and I pick up all my paperwork and my DD-214 and all that stuff. I take off on this motorcycle. And, when I tell the story now, it talks, I'll have a photo and it's me on this motorcycle. And, I wasn't all better. The way I looked at it, looking back, it's like I had a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other. And the devil was saying, ride to the middle of nowhere. And when you get there, you're alone, take that handgun out of your tank bag and end it, and great way to go. And And then there was an angel that was telling me, just keep riding. You got a reason to live. And I ended up being gone. I basically rode on and off for about 2 years, like all over the place. You know, I'd maybe stay with family and friends for a period of time. And, you know, probably the longest I was one place is maybe, you know, 3 weeks, a month. You know, maybe I'd be at home recharging, but then I'd immediately take off.
What'd you do for money during that time? And
I
food?
had no debt and I had money saved up. Didn't need it. I mean, when you got no debt and you got no expenses, you don't need much.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was, you know, that was when you go to Taco Bell and feast for $2.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I stayed with friends. I mean, most of it was, you know, I wasn't like getting a hotel. So most of it was like, I knew people all over and family all over. So a lot of it was just going to places, or I camped, I had a tent, you know, I go to national parks, I go to parks, I camp, you know, I lived real. I mean, I bet you in that time, I maybe spent $1,000 a month, maybe.
Okay.
You know, and most of it and almost all of it was just food and gas.
And this probably would have been like late 90s. Or
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
You were rolling in good dough then.
Yeah. I mean, a motorcycle gets, I think my KLR got like 60 miles to the gallon, maybe more.
Oh,
and when gas is $1.50.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I mean, think about it. And then on a motorcycle, you're going, you know, I'd maybe go at most 150, 200 miles a day.
Oh, okay.
And that's about all you would go. So, I mean, what's that? $3, $4?
Roughly, yeah.
I mean, it's not a lot. So I just did that. And then basically kind of where, God came into it is I was, somewhere in Texas and I'm in the middle of nowhere. And at the time I was completely ignorant. And there was this like Russian Orthodox church thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I never seen one before. I'm like, what's that doing in Texas? And so I stopped, and it was this Russian Orthodox church, and I'd never even been one or seen one. And they just had a service, and everybody had left. And so I walked in there, and they just had a service, and it was like nothing I'd ever seen. Like there's all these icons and pictures, and it's painted, and there's incense you could still smell in the air. And it was just, you were overwhelmed by the sensory nature of it. And I think there was like a janitor there closing up, and he told me I could sit there, you know, while he was doing whatever he was doing. And so I just sat there and I just like looked around, and, you know, in an Orthodox church, you know, the icons are basically, you know, for most of the history of Christianity, a Christian didn't have a Bible. So one of the ways, you know, for, you know, 1,000 years, 1,500 years to people start having more Bibles, it was like pictures, you know, there'd be pictures of things. And so this whole, you're looking around this church at all these pictures, and you're recognizing all these Bible stories. And it's just weird how they were done, made you think about them. And then you're smelling the incense, and I'm alone. And it was really probably the first time that I wasn't like angry at God. I'm like, this is what it means. It's an experience. It's like, there's another world out there. Like first time I'd ever, you know, kind of gotten it. Cause, you know, churches today especially tend to be the opposite of that. You know, I get it why, but you know, they tend to be like, you know, here in Kokomo, you know, it's a old, you know, store. There's nothing beautiful about it at all. And they come up with some cool name to sound relevant.
Yeah. There was a church I went to for a while over in, I want to say Lebanon or Whitestown, one of those two. But, that church was actually out of an old car shop.
Yeah, but you know what I mean?
Like the garages were like,
and I don't want to diminish what they do, but there's no beauty about it.
No. Yeah.
And so this was the opposite of that. And I'm just like, whoa, what is this? And so I didn't know what it was, you know, and which tends to be the case, you know, because, you know, that was the Eastern Church split in 1050. And, you know, most people think it's Catholic, and it's not. And so they just don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
And so that got me looking into it. And so then I'm looking for these books to learn more about it. And I'm on this journey. And there's this, you know, really famous, you know, book. It's called the Pilgrim's Journey. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And basically it's about this Russian peasant who's just on the road, walking the earth, wanting to make sense of life. And he's like, what does prayer mean? You know, what does that mean? What does it mean to pray? And I read this, and again, it was kind of coming from a reference I'd never really thought of before, and it kind of resonated with me. And so then that kind of began this journey of learning about the Orthodox Church and where it came from and all this and that. And then finally, I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to do that. That's what I'm going to do. And then also because the Orthodox Church is very, like, I think of them as tools. Like, they're very like, okay, you want to control your passions? Here's how you do it. Okay, you want to love God? Here's how you do it. Like, and as a Marine, that's what I like. I'm a very much just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Like, if that's the way you do it, I'll do it.
You know what that just reminded me of is the faith of the centurion.
Yeah.
In what is it, Matthew 8?
Yeah.
Where he's
the first non-Jew.
Yeah. And I love that story so much because Jesus in front of his disciples is like, this is the most amazing faith I've ever seen out of everybody in Israel, right to his own disciples.
100%. Yeah. And it was just, and so the Orthodox is very much that way. It's very much like, well, this is how you do it. And I'm like, that's cool by me.
Yeah.
And so, and then, so anyway, that kind of, it gave me, through that, you know, it gave me a sense of purpose. It gave me a sense of direction. It gave me a feeling of like, okay, for my life to matter. And again, this is a very common military thing. You know, for my life to matter, I don't have to be the baddest dude in the room and a killer. There are other ways my life can matter, you know, and way more than me, because I wasn't in long enough for it really to set in to develop. But, you know, a lot of times, you know, there's kind of two, when you look at the veteran community and the ones that don't make a good adjustment, you know, and they really struggle, it typically tends to be what you would think, which is they just went through horrible trauma. Because I mean, war, you can experience trauma you can't imagine that you won't talk about. Like, I mean, and what's always interesting to me, I still don't think the public really understands what war, because whenever I hear guys like talking on podcasts about what war's like, none of them get to the nitty gritty that I hear. Like, like I get to know these guys and they tell me things, man, you ain't gonna hear, because it's like so dark. Like, it's as dark as it gets. So there's that type, like, you just been traumatized. It's so deep you can't process it. The other type that struggle, and it can be a combination of the two, or it could be you never even had that. I mean, it might be you were in the military for 20 years and you didn't even have that traumatic of experience. You know, you might have never deployed. But the second type is your identity fully becomes, I'm a Marine, you know, I'm a soldier. And you know, in the Army, it wouldn't be I'm a soldier. It would be, you know, I'm airborne, you know, I'm a Ranger, I'm a Delta Force. Okay. You know, the Navy, I'm a SEAL, you know, I'm a submariner, you know, that fully, you know, I'm an aviator, you know, that becomes your identity. And then, and this can happen in the civilian world, because especially based on what your MOS is and what your job did, it could be all consuming for 20 years. You know, if you're a Navy SEAL, you deploy. And then as soon as you get back, you're training. And then as soon as you're done, and training means you might be going to another base, you might be going someplace else. Then as soon as you're done training, you're getting ready for your next mob. And then after you do your pre-mob, then you mobilize again, and then the whole thing starts over again. And there's not a lot of room for family.
So there's just this vicious cycle of going through the motions over and over again.
And that's who you are. And then what happens, and this is what I mean, you know, when I mentioned earlier about unpacking, you end up 20 years down the road, or, you know, 30 years down the road, you have no sense of who, not everybody, but some of them have no sense of who they are outside of that label. And then if you add to that, if you compound that with trauma, you know, loss, okay, a divorce,
and all the stuff you have to see in the middle of a war.
100%. And then think of how many, you know, I think another thing that just a very practical thing people don't realize, you know, let's say I've been in 20 years. I mean, there's a decent chance I was married, had a kid, the kid grew up, the kid's now in college, and now I'm a civilian alone trying to figure this out. Think about that. You know, you go in when you're 18, let's say you're in 25 years, which wouldn't be uncommon for a career person. Wouldn't be uncommon. You go in, you want to get married because you know want to screw like rabbits. You get married, you have a kid. Doesn't work out, you get divorced. So now you get out after, you know, 20 years after the kid's born. So now you get to 25 years and I'm not married, my kid's gone. And now at 43, I got to figure out who I am. That's hard.
Yeah, because most 18-year-olds right now are leaving high school trying to figure out who they're going to be for the rest of their lives by what college they go to
Yes.
and what they want to study.
And you answered that question when you were 18.
Yeah.
I'm a Marine.
Yeah.
I'm a whatever.
Yeah. My own brother, for many years did this job, did that job, and he enjoyed doing this, doing that, doing this, doing that. But he changed majors, I think, twice, and still to this day is just like, yeah, I enjoy what I do, but I don't know if it's like what I really want to do.
Yeah.
And his biggest passion is music. He knows that much.
Can't make money doing music nowadays, though.
Yeah. But still, even for his age,
that's why every
right now,
church has a music ministry, because there's a lot of musicians that want to make a living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, my point being, though, that even at 34, my brother still doesn't really know what it is besides music, what he wants to do. And there's no issue with that. He enjoys what he's doing.
And the problem is, eventually it'll be a problem.
Yeah.
Like if you're 50 and you don't have kids, and you know what I mean, and you never figured it out, you go dark. And I think what makes it, again, for a military guy, what makes it so devastating, I did a lot volunteering with addictions, and the most dangerous time for somebody is when they've been clean for a while. That's the most dangerous period for an OD, and because what happens is, I got clean, I climbed up to this mountain, and if I fall, the fall's deep, and a lot of them don't recover
because it's usually just that one drink.
Right.
But they're like, yeah, I can do one drink,
and then if you fall, if you don't OD, there's no picking yourself up,
and it's slippery too.
Exactly. Well, imagine you're that 18-year-old, and I would say 99% in some way, people who join the military are doing it to answer that question: who am I? What am I going to be?
Yeah.
Now, some people get in, they don't like it. They're out in 4 years. You know what I mean? And it literally is a check in the box. It's not their identity at all.
Yeah.
But you're that person that I think needs this the most. And that's your identity. You do that for 20 years. You do it for 14 years, you get hurt, whatever. Like me, like no intent to leave. I just break my back. And so you think you have the answer. And then it gets taken away
at 18. Yeah.
Yeah. And then at 38 or 30 or 40, whatever, then you lose it, and you don't have something to replace it. It's almost like a hole that you don't think you can fill. And because you can't get it back. You can't go back in. You're not gonna get younger. It's not like you keep playing. You can be a musician for your whole life. You just have to realize, maybe I'm not gonna make money doing it. I'm not gonna, raise a family, but I can still be a musician. There ain't no going back to the military. You're done. And then if they can't find a way to fill that hole, and then I think a lot of times that hole, the vacuum that it creates, is where the demons that lead to the PTSD, that lead to the suicide, come in. But just to finish that, and maybe, you can maybe ask some questions about PTSD. We started that way. So what happens, I get out, I go on that trip, I kind of get some wind under my sails, but I realize I'm not altogether right. And I kind of, long story short, on my own, kind of go, what do I need to do to unpack this stuff? In doing that, I had a professor at Vanderbilt that I loved, learned a lot. I studied math and psychology. This guy was the head of the psychology department at Vanderbilt. He was also the head of religious studies for undergrads, and he trained VA psychiatrists. So he's just a great guy. So I get a hold of him, and so him and I kind of correspond. And so I wanted to work with him, not just to figure out, what did I need to do to get better, but also once I kind of figured out my path, I wanted to share that with other people. And I didn't want to do anything stupid. I want to stay in my sandbox. I didn't want to be somebody I'm not. I'm not
stay in your comfort zone.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor, but still I got wisdom and stuff I want to share with people. So kind of like through his mentorship and guidance, I created this thing I called the Ladder Up, which is just basically my way of how do you find that identity? How do you process the trauma you've been through? Okay. And so I did that. And then I wanted to, my first reaction was, because now, we're in the 2000s and the war's going hot and heavy and people are coming home and they're having all these problems. And, I went to the military, and the first time I went to the military, I just would call bases, call commands, tell them about who I was. I just love to come tell my story, whatever. And they were all like, oh, we got this covered and we know what we're doing. We got all these programs. And so I was real frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a friend of mine who was an addictions counselor, and he had worked in prisons and stuff. And he said, you know, that might not seem like it, but, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, broke is broke. And that's totally true. I learned that's true. Meaning there are a lot of ways to get to the point you're broke, but when you get there, it's all the same, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same. Like you're in that dark box and you just want to die. It's the same. Getting there, totally different.
Mm-hmm.
10 human beings, 10 different ways to get there. But I wouldn't have believed it. And he's like, you need to come in and talk to some of these, you know, men and women that I see in these prisons. And I'm like, I've never even been arrested. Like, why they wouldn't want to hear me. So he finally talked me into it, and I go in there, and it was a room of maybe 200, you know, male inmates. And I just had my guitar, and I kind of sang some songs and told my story and, you know, my faith journey and psychological journey and all that. And when I got done, there was like 60 of them that just stayed. They just want to keep talking.
Wow.
And I was there for like hours. I knew nothing. And then they said, can you come back? And I'm like, I guess I can come back. And I mean, and at this point, there is not a thing I do today I hadn't even thought about. Like, not a thing I do today.
Yeah.
And so they asked me back. And so I keep going back. And then finally, I'm like, okay, I need to figure out how to take what I have learned and share it with them. And then that's when what I had talked to Dr. Gay about at Vanderbilt really began to formulate. And then I really put all this together. And so I spent a long time, many years,
Mm-hmm.
you know, from that point, just volunteering in prisons. And I mean, I've been federal prisons, death row, maximum security prisons, all over. And then at some point I was able to get onto a military base. And I think the first one I went to was Fort Campbell. And that went well. And then I started working with the psychology staff there. And then just through word of mouth, I started working at Fort Bragg, started working at Camp Lejeune, did Walter Reed. I'd go to Walter Reed 2-3 times a year, you know, during the war. And as I did that, a lot of those men and women were getting out. And as they were getting out, a lot were going into law enforcement. And I'd hear from them and they would say, hey, I see a lot of the same things here. Not a deployment in Iraq is like being a cop in Kokomo.
Sure, yeah.
But it was the way leadership dealt with helping us unpack this is the same, which
Mm-hmm.
means it sucks. And could you maybe come talk to my department? And then a couple of them were high enough up they could get their department. And so I started going there. And, you know, kind of the same thing that happened in the military, just word of mouth. You know, hey, well, I heard about you from here. Can you come talk here?
Was there a moment at all through any of that that you were able to kind of, I guess, kind of pause and reflect back and be like, I think this is what I want to do? Not so much of like what I need to be doing to help out people, but this is something now, like, this is like, I want to do this.
Yeah, well, I had that moment. So I did that for a few years, and it was just more of a calling. Like I not that I want to do or it's a vocation, but it was more, I need to, you know, I'm being called to do this.
Yeah.
And then probably about 2013 is I kind of got busy enough with the speaking. I couldn't really do, you know, even though I was an entrepreneur, I couldn't really do a day job and do that.
Mm-hmm.
There was a conflict, and I kind of had to make a decision, like, do I do this or do I do work? And I'm like, nah, I need to do this. So then it's pretty much been my main gig for 13 years.
Yeah.
It was pretty much. And then, you know, I've taught in class in literally every state except Hawaii. And this is one reason I cursed COVID, because I was finally going to do a training in Honolulu. and it was scheduled literally like 2 months after the COVID lockdowns.
Yeah.
So I would have been able to say in all 50 states, I have spoken and trained somebody. Literally Alaska, you know, North, South Dakota, every single one of them, except Hawaii. Yeah. So that's the only place I haven't been. And just, again, just like word of mouth. So it kind of worked out. But I learned a lot about, you know, PTSD, because, you know, typically the topics that I get asked to speak on and train on are PTSD, suicide prevention. Mm-hmm. And then what I fit into them, especially with what I do, is from like a leadership perspective. So it's like, what do you do about them? How do you understand them? But as a leader, what do you do to make sure that you're taking care of your team in those environments so that they're going to get help sooner than later?
Was there a come to Jesus moment, like a conversation, sort of like what you were talking about with the church and being angry, but then going to like calm and like understanding, all right, maybe like my view of the world is in fact wrong. Was there a moment that you had where you were just like, God, like I'm putting my faith in you on this and I'm gonna go where you tell me to go?
Yeah, I think I probably did at that moment. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think probably at that moment I got a peace with God. I'm like, just tell me where to go and I'll go.
Mm.
Honestly, it was probably that moment. Like I didn't know where that was gonna lead me. And I think what helped me, and this is really where my mindset completely changed, and it's why it was important to me. Up until that point, my view of church was very Western. It was
Mm.
very evangelical. It was faith is a transaction. Have I been saved or not?
Mm.
Do I have a statement of faith or not? And then everything after that's good and all.
So
But
kind of like surface level, would you say? Or
yeah, in a way, but you know what I
yeah.
mean? Like everything good of that all, but the primary purpose that you hear in church on Sunday morning, you saved or not. It's very seeker sensitive.
Mm.
Who are the unsure, and really and even though if you go in past history, not all denominations and stuff are that way, but they were very much that way. So
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, and so to me, there was always this sense of like, okay, what's that mean? And then anyway, I had a lot of other issues with that theology.
Mm-hmm.
The Orthodox theology, that's not even a question you'd really ask.
Mm.
It's more like, are you in union with God or not? Are you
Mm.
following God or not?
Are you not just believing? Are you obeying God?
No, I wouldn't even say obey is a good word. That's part of it, but
Uh-huh.
it's literally, are you in union with God? Are you following God? Are you desiring God? You're never going to obey him perfectly. It's not
Wow.
legalistic by any
Yeah.
means.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we're trained to think that's legalistic, but it's not. It's are you moving towards God or away from God? It's that simple. If you're moving towards God, you're saved. If you're moving away from God, you're not. It's that simple.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and I liked it because to me it was an active thing.
Mm.
It was a daily thing. That it to me it just made prayer and your faith in the Bible alive because it reminded you that every moment matters.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole idea is union with God is not something you got to wait to die for.
Yeah.
Something you can have like right now. Um, and then and
Yeah.
then
Amen, man.
and then
Amen.
and then there was just again there was a whole history of that gets lost.
Yeah.
Because you go to I grew up at a time. You went to any of my friends and said what happened before the Reformation. They're like, I don't know, Catholic. Wrong. You know what I mean? Like they
Yeah.
were just ignorant from like 33 AD to 1500. And so you don't realize there's this corpus of like guidance and information on doing that. Not are you saved or you're not saved, or what theology are you, or are you a Pentecostal, are you what evangelical? None of that. It's like no. How do you follow God?
Mm.
Not how do you legally live, not, what is the statement of faith you need to be saved, not, what are the signs of being saved. No, man. It's how do you live? How do you draw closer to God?
Mm.
And see, that's what I wanted.
Mm.
I was done.
So you were big on faith on works then, or sorry, faith based on works, and not so much of just I believe necessarily.
No, I think it's both. I
Okay.
mean, people love to say I'm saved by, people love to say that you're not saved by works, and they forget the verse that says, if you don't have the works,
Works.
though, you're not saved.
Yeah, your faith is dead. Yeah.
Yeah. So people like to forget that one. Um,
Conveniently. Yeah.
Yeah, and works. I don't even like using the word is important because that's how you deify. I mean, that's how you draw closer to God. It's by what you do.
Mm.
It's not emotion. It's not a moment in time.
Yeah.
It's what you do on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I had grown up. No, I wouldn't say I grew up like a works person. I just grew up on a very which my mom's family was Southern Baptist. And that probably influenced me the most because my dad was Methodist, but it was very at that time it was very the sort of mainstream American churches had become very corporate in a way.
Mm.
In my opinion, they weren't real dynamic. although, the Methodist Church has a lot in common with the Orthodox Church, because, the Methodist Church, from its Wesleyan theology, has this idea of, I've been saved, I'm being saved, I'm going to be saved. And it is a very like walking with God kind of thing, in a sort of primitive way, I would say, to the Orthodox way.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when I found out about the Orthodox Church, because of the Methodist upbringing, that whole idea of like union with God and following with God and deification, and that the point of being a Christian isn't like, is Jesus my personal savior today? It's no, man. It's growing with him. It's walking with him. It's praying with him. That all made sense to me. And then again, it also made sense of what I wanted to do with, working with veterans and law enforcement, is I just didn't want to tell them like, here's this quick little recipe, like, here's the formula for salvation, you're saved. I wanted to, I didn't want to be like, go see this counselor and it's all better, or take this pill and it's all better. I wanted to show them that unpacking, that rebuilding, man, there's a lot of steps.
It's a process.
Yeah. It's a process. It's a journey. It's like a thing you're going to have to do. And not only did I want to give them like realistic expectations for what that meant, I wanted to guide them. I wanted to say, this is what you're going to need to do.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, just like faith is, really your initial faith is the beginning of something. It's not the end of something. That, healing, from something like PTSD, really, it's the beginning of a journey that you're going to have to be committed to your whole life, because the memories are never going to go away. Like you're going to have the memories of what caused it. And if you're not careful, it can sneak back in.
Yeah.
So,
so if there's any way that you could, in your own words, and I think you've already done a really good job, change the perception of what PTSD really is, how would you want to change that perception today? Because I've seen kind of like what you were talking about, like all these war movies that some of them kind of touch on them, and especially the Chris Kyle one kind of touches on it a little bit, and how like he's hearing war noises, but he's just staring at a blank TV, not doing anything. I think The Hurt Locker also did a really good job of that as well, but like on the other side of the spectrum, where he's addicted to the war and not so much afraid or a truly like freeze or flight type of attitude towards the war.
So let me before I answer that, let me begin my answer with a question to you.
Yeah, sure.
What is either your perception, or what do you think the public's perception is?
Okay. I think the public's perception is that while it is serious, it's not as serious as other things could be.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just probably ignorance of it.
Yeah, a little bit of ignorance. Not so much like intentional ignorance, but just like, they downplay it a little bit. Mm-hmm.
And then what's your perception of it? I
think it's very serious.
How would you like, what would you say it is? Like if I said to you, hey man, what do you think PTSD is? How would you describe it?
I think that killing a human being does something to the human body that the human body naturally wants to go against.
Okay.
And so you are now being essentially forced to do something that the body wants to go against. Sort of like lying. Whenever you want to lie, they have like lie detectors are a thing for a reason.
Yeah.
Your body doesn't want to lie, so it does all these other things.
100%.
So I think that that's what PTSD ultimately is.
That's not bad. Those are both pretty close. Okay.
Okay.
I will.
Well, good.
I will help with the first one, and I will fill out the second one. So
sure.
One problem with PTSD is it in itself, it's misunderstood, because one of the things I do in the classes I teach is I go through straight out of the DSM-5, what is PTSD? And the very first thing is, and this is what gets misunderstood, it is a traumatic experience that can be either directly experienced, witnessed, learned, or repeated exposure to similar experiences.
Okay.
So what does that mean? I can be the one, I'll put it in sort of a war thing. I can be the one who gets shot. I can see somebody get shot. I don't get touched.
Okay.
I can learn about somebody getting shot. It can be my friend overseas and I'm home in Indiana. I'm perfectly safe.
And you hear the story.
Or just repeated exposure to bad things like that. Like I'm in a fob that gets mortared every day and I've never been hit. Okay.
Sort of like shell shock.
Could be, or just, you're an ER nurse and the 10th dead baby puts you over the top.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, a classic example of PTSD would be like, I'm in a car and a bomb goes off. I got PTSD, but that's not the only way for it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
What I like to think of it, to describe it, is we have a way, our brain, the world is a dangerous place. If you really thought about how dangerous the world is, you wouldn't leave your house. Okay.
It's funny you say that, because I actually have a buddy who, one of his old jobs was working with classified information for the U.S. Navy. He was a librarian for it. And I was like, so like, what kind of stuff do you work on? And I didn't want to be like too nosy, but he was like, if you knew half of the stuff that I knew, you wouldn't be able to comprehend how terrible war and military can be sometimes.
Oh yeah, it's bad.
Yeah.
So, you wouldn't leave your house. And basically, the thing that allows you to leave your house, PTSD breaks that down. Something happens and it basically burns into your nerves. I'm not safe. That is why one of the criteria of PTSD is hypervigilance, meaning I don't feel safe. I'm out of control.
Which can lead to acute paranoia and whatnot.
It could,
yeah.
But it's basically a loss of control. Now, a lot of things can make you feel like I don't have control. Okay, it could be you being in the car bomb when it goes off, or it could be your friend and you weren't there, you didn't have control over it. You see what I mean? Like all of those, so in a sense, PTSD is this feeling of like, I am not in control. I can't do anything about it. And then what happens? That
kind of snowballs.
Yeah, and then what happens? You get, usually the first symptom of it, and like when I'll do talks, for instance, and someone will come up to me and they'll say, I want to ask you about this, and I'm like, I'm no, go see a psychiatrist if you're worried, but what do you want to know? and usually they're just, hey, could I have this? Could this be me? Could this be my son? Could this be my husband? And I'll always ask them the same thing. Traumatic experience, is that in their, yep. Second thing, I'll say, can they go to sleep easy and stay asleep? If they can, they're good. I think they're good. If they can't, that might not be PTSD, but that's where all the bad stuff starts. Suicide, PTSD, all of it.
Because that mind is,
because you can't turn it off. You've lost control. So basically, you cannot control yourself, and no one sees it. You're very alone. Okay. And so that's what PTSD is. It isn't like a virus, or you're weak, or you're crazy. It's, you've had a traumatic experience that you could either directly witness, learn about, see it happen, be around a bunch of stuff. And for whatever reason, that part of us that tells us I'm actually in more control than I think, which is why I can drive down that road. All of a sudden you go, I'm not in control. And then when you feel that way, it isn't just, this is the misnomer. It's not, I'm worried about going down the road and a car bomb going off, which you might. You're worried about it all. Everything becomes dangerous. Like I during the wars at Fort Campbell, and I'm walking along and I see this wife, obviously of a soldier, and she's got a shopping cart full of food, and she's just standing there like a bothered look on her face. And I walk up, and there's her husband, the soldier, on the ground looking under their car. And I'm like, I look at him like, man, I hate to be nosy, but I'm here for this, I think. And the kid gets up and he's real nice. He goes, man, I know why you're worried. He goes, I get it. I'm getting help for this, but there's no way I'm getting in my car without looking underneath it. And I'm like, you good? Look under your car. Like, you can't help it. Like, you feel out of control. Yeah. Okay. And then I think what the average person needs to realize is that can happen to anybody. I mean, that can happen to a child who's raped. That can happen to someone in a car wreck and they can't get in their car. Okay. The difference in that, because all of these criteria, if you look in the DSM-5, there's not a section for like military PTSD. It's just PTSD. Right.
Because it's what's the word? Spectrum. It's on a spectrum.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, you can get PTSD being in a car wreck. You can get PTSD, your kid dies, whatever. And then that leads to the thing most misunderstood by the general public. They don't understand how horrific war is. I mean, they just don't. I mean, they don't understand, you walk into a room in Fallujah and there are body parts everywhere, and your friend is cut in half rolling around in blood with their arms flying, screaming, help me, right before they die. And then it's like, on to the next one. They have no idea. They have no concept.
There was a veteran, I think even recently, even said in an interview, uh, he was talking about how in Vietnam he was just walking around with or he was not walking around, he was in a car with his buddy. They were joking around, laughing, and the next thing you know, car blew up. And he said, "Do you know how haunting it is to hear a man scream with no lungs?"
Oh yeah. Yeah, 100%.
That changed my perception.
Yeah, and there's a I could give I'm not I won't do it today, but
Yeah.
I give you a million stories like that. Okay.
Yeah.
And then but then on the flip side of it, I think it's partly because we don't want to think about it. We want to think PTSD is only the really crazy stuff, and how often does that happen? And that's a military thing.
We shield ourselves.
Yeah,
from
we
it.
shield ourselves when they realize the average person in Kokomo's had trauma, and they might have effects of it, and people just they don't want to talk about it. And then I think another part, a thing that gets forgotten, and it always, to me, in my experience, and I think this needs to be studied more because it really isn't part of the criteria for PTSD, but in my experience, it always comes with it, and that is moral injury. Like, I don't even know if I can think of somebody I've ever known who had really bad, severe PTSD and also did not have moral injury. And the reason is, and moral injury is, in sense, anything that injures our sense of the way we think the world should be. You know, in a common way, you know, it happens in the military is you're 18, you think everything's black and white. You think I'm good, you're bad. Okay. And then you go to war and you realize we're not always good and they're not always bad. And that's a really gray line. And then if that's the case, what does that make me? And then if all of a sudden the way you see the world, that's moral injury. And, you know, I remember I met a guy, you know, the first it really dawned on me, I was at Fort Campbell during the war. I was meeting with this Special Forces Green Beret soldier who'd been on like 13 deployments in his career. You know, they do shorter deployments. And one of them is he's over in Iraq, and he says the thing that got in his head the most is he had this Iraqi special police like captain he had to go see. And this guy had taken over one of Saddam's old generals' homes, and wasn't a palace, but it was a really nice home.
Yeah.
And every couple weeks he had to go see this guy, and he brought him a small duffel bag with about a couple $100,000 in cash every 2 weeks. And he had, and his job was to go there to see this guy and, you know, shake his hand and smoke cigars and get intel at what was going on. Because this guy represented the Iraqi government that we supported. And, you know, he's my buddy. He said the problem was every time I went there is to get to his office, you had to go down these stairs and go down a hallway and up these stairs. The way it always took me. He said, I think they were just doing it to make a point to me. And it was where that people that they were going to interrogate there, they kept them. And it's like, it's where they tortured people. And you'd walk down there and all the doors would be off the hinges. And he said the way that this guy liked to torture people is they would sew you up in a sheet, and then they would beat you to death with a baseball bat. And then by the time you were dead, the whole sheet was red. And then the guys waiting in the hallway, they'd have them come in and grab that person and bring them outside and dump them, and then go, you're going to talk to us or that's going to be you. And that guy just thought that was really funny. And he's like, I had to go see that guy every 2 weeks and be his friend. Hey, man, how's it going? Good to see you.
Just totally act like what I just saw was
nothing.
Totally normal.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Those are bad guys. And then there was,
damn, dude.
And then there, well, that's not even the word. I mean, I've heard so much, dude. And then about the same time, and then the other one was there was a guy, and this guy was at Bragg. I think it was another one. This guy was at Fort Bragg, and they did snatch and grabs, and basically they would go after high value targets, and they had about a 6-month period, and their main sort of way they did it, it was, you know, night vision, goggled up, you go in at night, everybody in the house is asleep, you go in there, you grab the bad guy, and you're not trying to kill him. This was guys that were like suspected, and we're just trying to nab them, we're going to talk to them. And he's like, the problem with it is we would, he goes, there's two things that got in your head a little. He says, but you justified it by going, well, they're the bad guys. One was you'd go in their home in the middle of the night, and when you grab them and got them zip tied, their whole family wakes up. And so you've got all these little kids and women freaked out, screaming.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we know enough of their language at this point. They're going, don't take daddy. Don't kill him. Where are you going? We're dragging him out. Kids dragging onto us. And we justified it by like, he's the bad guy. He's the guy blowing us up. He's the terrorist. And then we would hand him off. He said the second bad part is we would hand him off to these Iraqi special police, like the guy from the other guy, that were basically, we knew were going to torture them, like really torture them, and probably kill them. But we did it. We handed them off to them because we're like, you know, they're the bad guys. We're the good guys.
Yeah.
He said, so we did it for about 6 months, and it was like a nightly thing. He's like, I can't even tell you the number of people that we took like that. And he said, man, you know, you'd get numb to it. And then we found out after about 6 months that the list of the people who were supposedly the bad guys were actually good guys that the bad guys wanted us to take out for them. And so, you know, so basically a bad guy in the Iraqi special police had us take out all the people that we really needed to know.
Wow.
And then it dawned on me, all those fathers, all those husbands that I had taken away to give to somebody to be tortured and probably killed were good. We're on our side. Can you imagine? He says, all of a sudden in that moment, I could remember every kid's face. I could remember every woman's face. I could remember every voice. I could remember every mission I went on. See, that's moral injury. Now, guaranteed, both of those guys, when I met them, because I was there visiting and they had PTSD, both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, again, why it's hard to talk about. Now, some of it isn't. You know what I mean? If I'm driving down a road and a car bomb goes off, you could get moral injury from your friend dying, but you could probably tell somebody, I was in an accident, my friend died. Okay. You did what that guy just told me. You're not telling people what caused it. Are you going to tell people that's what you did?
Right.
You're not.
Right.
You know, and not everything, you know, war. One thing about war too, it's so unique. Like, I mean, you could go to 10,000 combat vets in Iraq and Afghanistan and get 10,000 different stories, you know? So that makes it hard, you know, because even though your story may seem universal to the public, to you, it's very unique. And so then you don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I think the first perception I would just want to change with people, that if you think you know what war is, you're ignorant. And if you think you know what PTSD is, you're ignorant. And you need to go talk to a vet and you need to find out what it's really like. And then you need to ask yourself, how would that impact me if, you know, I killed someone who was innocent? I killed someone I thought was guilty and found out later they were innocent. Yeah. You know, what if I was how would that impact me, that if I shot at the person through a window who was shooting at me, and then when I went in the house, I found out they were 8. Yeah. And their dad had handed them a gun. Yeah.
And I think that's, and I mean, I don't want to speak on anybody's behalf really, but I think that from the outside looking in, that's how, especially in this country, whenever there's conflicts halfway around the world, that we really are good at drawing black and white. Yeah. Here's the good guy, here's the bad guy, but we're not understanding the fact that, yeah, that is the good guy, that is the bad guy, but there's probably some bad guys on the side that I'm supporting.
Or they're good guys I would think of it, I would look at it more, there's good guys who do bad things. Yeah. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, there's good guys who if it's life or death, you're going to do bad things. Your survival instinct's going to take over. Yeah. And so I think that's one thing people need to understand. It's also why we need to not forget about these, because when it really sets in, it's 10 years later, 15 years later. You know, someone that was in Iraq, I mean, think about it. There are people, you know, if you were in Iraq in 2007, 2008, that's the surge. That's when it was crazy. That's almost 20 years ago now. They don't look like young men. They've got graying beards. They're gaining weight. Like, no one's going to look at him and think that your head is still in Fallujah. You know, no one's going to look at you and go, yeah, you might have been a Ranger back in, 2011. And so we forget about them, and we forget the hell that we send them to. And then we don't. And I, to get back, earlier, I mentioned what we need to do. I think what we need to do is we force people to unpack this. But also it's a lifelong thing. Like, I got your back. Like, I asked you to go do that. I'm not going to make you run through hoops. I'm not going to put obstacles in front of you to get cared for afterwards, which is what we do. We make it hard. Okay. and it needs to be much easier. It needs to be like, man, it could be 20 years later, and whether it's the VA or your local community, we're going to take care of you.
Mhm.
So I think, especially specifically, and I could say the same thing about law enforcement. We probably don't have time, but you think you know what that job is, you don't, and you think you know what they have seen and gone through that can break them, you don't know. And before you judge it, you need to know that better. Yeah. And then I think on the flip side of it, about, misconceptions of what PTSD is because we want to make mental health real clinical and medical. Yeah, we want to make it like, you have a broken leg. So here's what you do. You set the bone and you put a cast on it, and 3 weeks later, your leg's just like new. Yeah. Or, you got a heart condition, so we're going to give you a bypass and put it in there and your heart's breathing. Well, we want mental health to be the same way. So we want it to be like, here is this condition, and then here's what you do. Yeah. And then here's this nice, but it
take this pill to do this and this and this and this, and then here's the last pill to offset this pill and this pill and this pill.
Yeah, and it doesn't work that way. And then also because of that, you tend to see it like it's this virus or it's this cancer, it's this diagnosis I don't want. And there's like this mystery to it. And really, it's just life. There's not a human being that's not one bad day away from having PTSD.
Yeah.
There's not one, man. There's not one human being that's not one day from PTSD. Something, I talked this on a YouTube video I did recently, but it's always stayed with me. So I'm speaking to a bunch of fire chiefs. And this guy, older guy, fire chief, comes up to me and he wanted to share this with me. So here he is. Been a firefighter. I think he's like an assistant chief at a department. Been a firefighter for years, 15, 20 years. And everything in his life's good. I mean, I'm sure he's seen trauma, but from talking to the guy, life was good. Marriage was good. Kids were good.
Yeah.
Carried some things with him. Absolutely did not have PTSD. Life's good.
Yeah.
He's the type of guy that even working with trauma might go, man, I get people see bad stuff, but I've seen some bad stuff and I'm okay. What is this PTSD thing really? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Which isn't far from the civilian that doesn't really know anything, that just goes, I don't get it. So he says, I'm driving to work one day. This was in a city up in Michigan. And he's like, I'm driving to work one day and I get a call. Well, I hear the radio because you're an assistant chief. Typically, you're over a lot of people and you got your radios. So I'm driving, I hear on the radio, there was a call, and I'm literally like a block from where this house is. And I could tell from the call, like someone's in distress, and it's a woman who's choking, and her family just called it in. And he's like, dude, I'm thinking, what a miracle. I'm a block away, And so he gets there, he gets out, he gets in the house, and he says, when I get in the house and I look at her, my first thought is, I got this. I see her kids, I see her husband, they're freaking out, they're crying, save my mommy. I look at her and he's like, okay, my first thought is, man, gonna be a hero today, I got this. Mm-hmm. He goes, and then I start working on her and I don't got it. And then as it dawns on me, I don't got it, it gets worse and the kids get worse. And that goes on until eventually she's dead and she's not coming back. But I can't face those kids. So I keep working on her. And I work on her a while, knowing she's dead with those kids screaming, going, I don't want to face those kids, until eventually, I've crushed every rib she has, every bone in her chest. And I'm like, okay, I'm done. And then I got to look up and face those kids and tell the dad she's dead. And what made it worse? It was Christmas Eve. Oh. And so he goes, I hate Christmas, man. Now see, that led to PTSD. We're all one day away from that.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not something that like weak people get or crazy people get or soldiers get. It's something anybody can get. Wow. And the only reason we talk so much about it when it comes to first responders in the military is because they got more opportunities for bad days.
Right.
But anybody is a bad day away from that. There's no blood test. There's no brain scan. It's like, it's life, man. Mm-hmm. It's life.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. Dang. Man, I appreciate all the stories, man. I mean, it's been eye-opening for me right now too. 100%. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I almost get, once I get cold to it, because I mean, I hear that, but I realize, especially when I come home and talk to my wife or my friends, people don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they don't think about it, because people don't talk. How do you talk about that?
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, I just wish people would step, even in your own community, like when you see an ambulance going, okay, just think about this.
Somebody's life is changing right now.
Well, what if that's a firefighter on the way to the home of a 2-year-old? Think of your 2-year-old. Think of your kid when they were 2. And someone's got their hands on them and they die in their hands. That's what they do every day. Every day that's happening somewhere. Every single day.
Yeah.
That is happening somewhere. You know, and what's interesting, and it's the same, what's really common, and this goes back to what, think of how common this is, because it goes back to what you just told me about the Vietnam guy. Okay. Think of what happened to him getting blown up, but think of what he remembers. The scream with no lungs. It's not what you would think. Like, if you were going to write a story and you'd never been in that,
yeah,
you would never in a million years think that until you heard it from that guy.
Yeah.
Well, a very similar thing that you hear from first responders, that when you hear it, it's obvious, but you would never think of it yourself. And you ask them, you know, what were the bad moments in their career? What were the things they remember? And there's a lot of things, but the one that is probably the most common are the cries of a mother when she realizes a child's dead.
Yeah.
It's like an animal cry. It's not human. Like, it's coming from a place. It's like you've never heard it before. Wow. It is an inhuman cry, and they never forget it. Yeah. As long as they live, that'll be in their head. They will carry it with them, you know? And then, you know, for PTSD develop, it could develop then. It could develop on a call 5 years later that's similar. It could develop, they're retired and their child has a kid and they haven't seen him in a while, and they go see him and they see their grandchild, and that grandchild is the same age as the child that died in their arms, and they hear that mother's cry, and then they are there. Mm-hmm. That's PTSD. Yeah. That's what it is. That could be anybody.
Yeah. Well, to wrap up, what are some ways that people can find you? And are there any parting words that you would like to give real quick in, I guess, about like 90 seconds or so to anybody that is struggling and is watching this right now?
Best way to get a hold of me is probably my website, silouan.com, silouan.com. You can get to everything I do from there. The advice is, and we could do a whole program on this, the key is connection. You die alone, you live connected. You have got to, I don't care who it is or what it is, whether you walk into a church, you go see a counselor, you talk to a friend. The key to all of this is connection. Mm-hmm. Trauma is the human experience. And the way we overcame it for all of our history was we had a group, we had a tribe, we had a church, okay? And what makes it worse today is not that the trauma is worse, it's that our foundation is weaker and most people are disconnected. And as hard as it is to do, you know, and maybe some of these stories I told today helped you, you're not alone. Whatever you're feeling, whatever you're going through, there might not be someone who's experienced exactly what you've experienced, but you're not alone. And I'll just leave you with something, a faith thing. You know, one of the things that got me over my anger at God was, you know, the words that Jesus gave from on the cross, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And people love to like put some deep theological meaning to that.
Yeah.
I take it at its word. In that moment, he felt abandoned and alone. And he recalled, you know, a psalm where King David felt the same way. And what it did for me is make me realize is more than anything, Jesus was sent to know I'm not alone. God cares about me. That whatever you're going through, he knows what it's like. And that abandonment, he feels the same way. And not only can Christ give that to you, but a friend can. A friend can remind you that you're not alone. And so as hard as it is, I beg of you, if you're suffering right now, reach out to somebody. Reach out to God. Reach out to Jesus. Reach out to a friend. Reach out. Yeah. Okay, you overcome this connecting with somebody else. You don't overcome it by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I appreciate you.
Yeah, man.
I really do. Thank you so much for bringing light to this. This
is fun.
This has been a deep
lot to talk about it. Yeah. However long we've been sitting here.
But. Yeah. But I appreciate it so much.
Man.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you. If you like today's episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I'm your host, Thomas Casey Zellers, and I'll see you in the next one.